How's it going, people of Middle-earth? Welcome to my Rings of Power Episode 5 breakdown, recap, and overall review. If you're wondering why I missed last week's Rings of Power episode, I was away. There are many more theories to get into in today's or this week's episode of Rings of Power, with what is really going on with Adar, who is Sauron, as the old man asked later on, and just where things are going. So let's get into this. Would really appreciate a like, by the way. Don't have a huge Tolkien audience on this channel, even though, as I say that, I realize some people could be like, this isn't Tolkien! How dare you? But no, really, it helps boost these videos out there a bit more. If you're enjoying the breakdowns, just leave a like and maybe consider subscribing for more breakdowns like this. Also, if I'm a bit more nasally today, I'm sick at the minute. I'm really congested today, so if my voice is annoying, I do apologize about that. But let's start right at the beginning. We have the stranger saying my great thumb, but really he's trying to say what Nori is saying, and that is migration. Now, I know I'm already diving into it, but I'm going to and through each episode at the minute as to, okay, is the stranger Gandalf one of the Astari being sent down? Yes, I'm very, very aware of the canon and how the Astari get sent down quite a lot further on, but already in this show we know there's canonical changes, there's time condensing, we know that certain events that happen with Isildur, in terms of when he was born, I believe around the year 3209-ish, can make sense within the couple of hundred years after that. But for example, the Rings of Power that haven't even been forged yet by Celebrimbor happen in the year around 1500 and something, so that's technically 1500 years in the past, yet the show has Isildur in it who isn't born until the year 3200 and something, yet you see what I mean, like the Rings of Power were supposed to be forged a long time ago. Acknowledging that, that's why certain characters are open to speculation, such as the stranger being one of the Astari, being sent down a little bit early. And there could be a few ways this can go, obviously, and without retreading everything that we've been talking about the previous episodes, this episode made me a little bit more suspicious, and I was really leaning more towards one of the Astari side of things. Maybe Gandalf, there's other contenders, obviously, but amongst a few scenes with the Harfoots here, or the Hobbits, if you will, this is where we have the character known as Eminem. I'm sure many of you know who I mean, one of those three women who are overlooking where we had the stranger fall, because that's what happened. We had a little bit of a flashback to when the flames were there, and everyone's aware of how it was likened to that of the Great Eye, even though the Great Eye isn't even a thing yet, you know, the Tower of Barad-dûr. But what is really fascinating about these three characters, and once upon a time as well, when the trailers were coming back, the main person of whom people have called Eminem, and obviously it's just because kind of reminiscent to Eminem's look, goes down and looks at all of the charred ash. You know, obviously the flame has gone out since the stranger landed, and she seems to be kind of like gauging and vibing the energy that was left behind. Now, what's super fascinating about this, if I jump and dart around the episode, we have that old man, I forget the name of the guy, but he's like, oh, have you heard of him, lad? Sauron, you know, he's coming, you know, the shooting star. Like, basically he linked that falling star, the stranger of whom arrived, to Sauron. Now, really, what does this old man know? We can't take what he's saying for pure fact. Okay, the fact that he said the falling star is, you know, coming, and, you know, that has to do with the darkness returning, Sauron returning, evidently putting those two darkness and Sauron names in the same sentence. That then means it's Sauron? Not necessarily, but now we have these shady three ladies attending the crash site of the stranger. It does make you think, well, granted, I don't know exactly who these three followers are. They could very well be looking for their master, Sauron, to return. Maybe they wanted to get there first, but they didn't. So what they've done in this episode is that they've gone to the crash site. They're like, oh crap, I wonder where he's gone. And they're obviously going to be following up, trying to find the stranger. And there's already lots of thoughts going through my head about this, and I've seen some other people say various things, that maybe they think the person who fell from the star, I'm already losing my voice, is Sauron. And when they get to him, maybe even at that point, we as the audience might believe, oh, okay, it isn't Gandalf, but it is Sauron. But then it turns out to be that the followers who thought it was Sauron and think, oh my lord, you just don't remember. You know, obviously he doesn't know the language. He's kind of forgetful from where he came from when he fell from the sky, this stranger. They think that he just needs to maybe just be woken up by a spell or something like that. But maybe that might not work, and it could still end up being one of the Astari, such as Gandalf. Or, to be honest, let's just assume the other thing. It could be that they follow the tracks of the Harfoots, find the stranger, do a little whammy to wake up his memory or whatever, and it's like, oh, I'm Sauron. Now, the thing about that is, I just don't really get it. What happened to Sauron after the defeat of Morgoth, where he was standing in that first episode with all the orcs bowing to him? It's like, why has he fallen from the sky now and just has no memory? I understand that we should and will probably get that context filled in if the reveal is that the stranger is Sauron, but it just seems to be a bit of a weird chain of events for him to be in his armor with his little giant scepter staff thing, all the orcs bowing to him. A long time goes by, like 5 centuries, with Galadriel looking for him, and then he just falls out the sky. This is why I'm not mega sold on the stranger being Sauron. But what I will believe for now is that the 3 ladies who are looking for him, likely followers of Morgoth, Sauron, or whatever, do believe that the stranger that fell from the sky is their Lord Sauron. But honestly, I'm just rambling at this point. I don't freaking know at the end of the day. Here we have him defend the Harfoots. He wipes out a few wolves. They get scared and run away. But the thing is, that power of him slamming the ground injured his arm, and he wanted a bit of anti-inflammatory, shall we say, so he started freezing his arm. But when he was kind of caught up in the spell, it started freezing Nori's hand because she put her hand there. And the thing is, they kind of framed it as like, oh, you know, tense and sullen evil music in this moment. But to me, I just read it as this stranger guy who's already very, I don't know, unfamiliar with everything and still a bit weird, was just too caught up in his spell. So he just did a little discharge thing and Nori got sent flying back. But she ran away. And at this point, there was kind of sinister-esque music. I do believe that these things are misdirects intended to make you think that this person is Sauron, especially with the fact that we had the 3 followers, or whoever the freaking hell they are, Eminem, for example, looking for the comet person. With that being combined with this sinister music in this moment, I think they just want to lead you down that path. I'm not saying it's definitively Sauron or Gandalf or whatever. I just feel like they're leaning more towards, in this episode in particular, with those followers finding that crash site, with this sinister music, with Nori running away, that it could be someone more sinister than what we were led to believe initially. Now, meanwhile with Adar, obviously that reveal at the end of the episode before last when we first saw that face, they wanted you to think, oh, could this be Sauron? The orcs are calling him father, and that's, you know, basically a loose translation of what I believe Adar is. But as we all knew, way too easy to be Sauron himself, right? I think we were all kind of leaning towards maybe a follower. But in this episode, it's kind of landed me in the stage of I'm still confused exactly as to what Adar's purpose is. Because in this episode, we have that orc come up to him, the same orc of whom I believe maybe was cut by Theo. I could be wrong because either way they said the tunnels are complete, and he says, your arm, show it to me. And Adar deliberately brought that orc's arm out into the sunlight because we had Adar here looking at the sunlight, very enticed by it, as if it was one of his final times looking into the sunlight. And that's because it could be, because this dialogue ahead says, I wish you could feel it as I do, for soon it will be gone. And with it, the part of me that knew its warmth as well. I shall miss it. And that is simply that he's kind of implying that soon he will stop feeling the sunlight's warmth, but rather get the blistery, burning skin as if he was a vampire, like the orcs experience when they're in direct sunlight. Now, why would he start blistering like that? I'm not exactly sure. Maybe he feels like when he gets the blade or the hilt or whatever that is, the key as they're referring to it in this episode, he will ascend to this godhood that he spoke of. Or he did say something like, you know, I'm not a god, not yet. Either way, you know, is he a follower of Sauron? I mean, you'd have to think that he has to be in that chain of command because he is rallying the orcs in the southern lands. This will become Mordor. The Tower of Barad-dûr will be built. Yet much later, when half of Bronwyn's people were too afraid, and just like their ancestors who served Morgoth, they too wanted to surrender as per the message that Arondir gave on behalf of Adar. He seemed really pissed by the old guy. We can't forget that Waldred says that he's long awaited his arrival and he pledges his undying loyalty to Sauron. And this was kind of a funny moment because I believe there's quite a few memes going around at this point of when Waldred was kneeling. We have Adar look back and he's like, you are Sauron, are you not? And basically that is every fan of the show right now to every single character on the show. But in this moment, I don't know if he felt slighted, being referred to as Sauron. Maybe he feels unworthy to be mistaken for Sauron, and maybe it's an insult to even be perceived that way when he couldn't even live up to Sauron's image. So he needs to push out an act of punishment in this moment, because he just grabbed Waldred and starts choking the man and informs him to kill the boy, saying that only blood can bind. Either way, I may be looking into this way too much. All I'm saying is that when he says, "You are Sauron, are you not?" he kind of flips out. Adar himself gets a bit mad. So this is making me think, okay, well, if Sauron isn't Adar, who is Sauron? Where is Sauron? And what did he do after, as I said in that scene that you're seeing on screen right now, during the 5 centuries that Galadriel was hunting him? Like, where is he? Is he really one of the other characters like Halbrand that everyone is also theorizing about? Because the more stuff like this unfolds, it does indeed seem as though that Halbrand is, as what Galadriel found out about, an Aragorn-esque character hiding away from his heritage, and that is to be king. And in this episode as well, especially, he seemed very much so Aragorn-like. He feels because of his ancestors who followed Morgoth, he wants to shy away from that as well. Well, what was Aragorn afraid of? Isildur, and what his decision did. He feels like that same weakness flowed through his veins as well. So very Aragorn-esque there, but you never know what twist this show might pull out. Again, as I said, there could be something as random as that Sauron the shapeshifter just posed as Halbrand. This is exactly what they want me to do, just rack my brain about what's really going on here. Now, some fans are saying that Adar could be Maglor, of whom, you know, with regards to the fact that Adar wears one glove, he's got a little bit of burn marks, but mainly Maglor touched a Silmaril, if I remember correctly, and it kind of burned his hand. Now, yes, this character does have a free hand, he does have a glove on one hand, and, you know, Maglor in the lore did do some kind of messed up things with regards to even acquiring that Silmaril that ended up burning that hand, that the very hand that the glove could be covering on Adar. And in the Rings of Power show, I suppose they could be giving Maglor a storyline in where, you know, he's one of Sauron's followers, and this is just a part of a new journey for him in an effort to bring about Sauron's darkness over Middle-earth. Meanwhile, in Numenor, they are getting ready to sail to Middle-earth. Obviously, after what Isildur did, Elendil is being quite hard on him, saying that he made his choice because at this point, despite Isildur also wanting to go west, he wants to do something first that's worthy of Numenor, and that is to go to Middle-earth, which, as we know at the end of this episode, he ultimately does kind of get what he wants, even though it's a bit of a down-ranked duty. A lot of the people of Numenor are asking after Ar-Pharazôn to just like, really? Are you supporting the queen who is risking Numenorian lives for some grimy Southlander and a warmongering elf? Now it seems that Halbrand's got his like little guild sigil or whatever it is to start smithing, and he makes a very, very pretty blade. But as Galadriel says later on, at the smith or tongs will just, you know, not give him any peace, the same as Galadriel, so they both need to head back to Middle-earth. A lot of this episode was about Halbrand kind of going back and forth, like, do I really want to do this? What I did find interesting is later on in the episode when Galadriel confronted him about the importance of how his decision may very well be the final impact on, you know, what happens to Middle-earth, he says, "You're wrong. You don't know what I did before I ended up on that raft. You don't know how I survived." Now that is interesting because over that scene played the very scene of Half Bronwyn's village going to Adar to surrender, as if inferring that maybe Halbrand did something similar to that, like give in to the enemy. Maybe he just escaped abandoning his people. In this moment, we didn't really get a definitive answer as to exactly what Halbrand did to survive. And he even said something like, "You would forsake me, everyone would, if you knew what it was." And I was like, damn, what did you do? Now with Elrond and during this episode, or even the High King Gil-galad, we got a little bit of an ulterior motive behind what Gil-galad was planning for Elrond to do, even with Celebrimbor, who was hiding this from Elrond as well. I did feel a bit bad for Celebrimbor because he did say later on that he begged him to let you in on the fold, Elrond. At the beginning, we had them having a little bit of a feast with Durin. Durin was, you know, rubbing it in a bit about the table, a completely made up story. I do really actually enjoy the friendship between Durin and Elrond, by the way. I do think the guy, I can't remember the name, I do apologize, behind Durin is a very good actor. He's definitely up there as one of my favorites of the show so far. And this is when we get the explanation behind why High King Gil-galad introduced Celebrimbor to Elrond, because there is, you know, something behind the curtains there of which he's worried about. And this all goes back to that leaf that was falling when the comet was falling, and that somewhat rot was appearing on the back of the leaf, because it's also depicted on that tree. And he asks him to recount the song of Hifalglir. I can't remember the name. Elrond says that it speaks of a battle high amongst the peaks of the Misty Mountains, of which some claim that this tree hid the last of the Silmarils. And so we had an elven warrior who poured all of his light into the tree, but on the other side, a Balrog of Morgoth, who was pouring all of his hate into it. And as their duel was happening, lightning hit the tree, and it kind of rippled and splintered throughout the rock of this mountain, and thus it actually poured and created mithril ore veins. And the reason why it has this light emanating from within the ore is because it is said that it contains the light of the lost Silmaril, which could very well be what ends up saving the elves. So this is where Gil-galad shows Elrond, and it puts him in a very tricky decision to make, because he made that oath to Durin to not say anything about the mithril. That, hey, look, here's the tree. We were hoping that this blight of rot would go away after Galadriel's return. It's essentially a manifestation of this inner reality that the light of the Eldar, our light, is fading. Now, this is most likely because of Sauron's return, of which Galadriel was pointing out to High King Gil-galad and everything, and that is probably what it is, but they're now thinking it's because of not that and just something else. And it's Celebrimbor who told Elrond that he has tested it, nothing diminishes its light, and that they believe that if they can secure vast quantities of it, enough to saturate every single elf out there in the light of the Valar once more, we need the light of the Eldar that is within the mithril, shining from within, to saturate over every last elf out there so that we can try and contain it. But I like how Durin heard Elrond say this, and he's just like, so the fate of the elven race is in my hands, and then they go off to try and convince the king, which is going to be certainly an interesting challenge for them. I also like the reference from Celebrimbor about Elrond's father, Erendil. He was essentially, I believe, half human, half elf, but he got the choice to become elven, of which he did choose ultimately, but first he sailed to the Valar in an effort to get their help in the war, of which ultimately allowed them to defeat Morgoth, but his fate was to essentially sail the skies with one of the shining Silmarils forevermore. So he essentially became this little floating star, you know, gleaming light of the Silmaril that goes back and forth, and whenever Elrond looks up, it's like, hey dad, hey. But it is prophesied that he will return one day in the battle to end all battles, or something like that. But let's get to the final chunk of what we need to discuss, and that is when Theo showed Arondir the blade, and he says that he's seen this before, and he pulls back these leaves, and it's kind of this monument, if you will, I guess, from the ancestors of these villages of whom once followed Morgoth in the days of old. We had this kind of weird, creepy, masky kind of thing there, and then the actual blade going into the sword in the rock at the same time. And Arondir says that it's a key conjured by some forgotten craft of the enemy to enslave your ancestors. Now, this could be linked to what Galadriel found way at the end, right before her elven party mutinied against her. You saw those like orcs like frozen in the freaking wall, and she spoke of some like old lost magic or whatever it was. The thing is, he says that this blade is a key to enslave your ancestors. So I'm still not exactly sure of what this key is meant to do. Is it a key that can also unlock Sauron? Like, did he go to a place that was unlocked by this magic, and that's why the followers, or should I say Adar in particular, with the orcs, were trying to recover this key? But at the same time, as Arondir says, the enemy commander spoke of becoming a god, of giving the orcs a home in these lands, of which, as we know, becomes Mordor. But Sauron does that. So Adar, is he self-serving here? But surely at the same time, if he's looking for this key, it's not just self-serving. He might want to bring back Sauron, and again, going back to the key, unlocking Sauron. Maybe Sauron hid away for those 5 centuries where Galadriel was hunting him, and the reason why she couldn't find him is because he's locked away in some kind of little I don't know where. There's a lot of clarification that needs to happen in the episodes ahead for when we finally do get to Sauron. Like, it could be the case that he's none of the characters on the show. Like, everyone's been thinking, you're Sauron, are you Sauron, are you Sauron? And really, he's chilling, and this blade is the key. Once Adar gets it, maybe, just maybe, Sauron can be unlocked to come back. But at the same time, as I said, the key is apparently a craft of the enemy to enslave your ancestors. So is it just to do that and it doesn't unlock Sauron? There's all of these questions. Either way, Bronwyn is pretty scared at this point. She's thinking of surrendering like their ancestors did to serve the great evil, because what else can they do? The torches are in the background. They have days, if not hours. But at the same time, you know, you can probably think that they're going to trap all of those orcs under a lot of the rocks. The camera panned up to the tower, so maybe they're going to collapse it. It might just slow them down, and this is probably what's going to happen just in time so that Galadriel, Halbrand, and the Númenórean warriors can maybe arrive to wipe out a few of the orcs. But I think that it's possible that even though they might be successful in that, it could be possible that Adar could also get the blade despite being driven back. So overall, I enjoyed this episode. It was pretty slow. That's not through me being fatigued. It's just that the pacing was like, okay, let's slowly row the boat, but it's still in a very visually impressive way. But it's more that quite a lot of exposition for, if you've seen the promo for next episode, we're finally, I think, getting into a bit more of a snowball momentum with regards to, okay, we've done the exposition for Númenor now, we've chilled there for a bit, we've done this with the dwarves, we finally got to the root of the Mithril and what Gil-galad wants with regards to, you know, soaking in the light of the Valar from the Mithril on every single elf. We've got Adar marching his legions. Like, things seem to be on the precipice of, I think, what a lot of fans have been wanting to see, and that is just a little bit more of a tempo to these episodes that are ahead of us. So what did you guys think of Rings of Power Episode 5? Let me know your theories, your thoughts. We'll be reading every single comment that you guys have to say. Leave a like on this video if you did enjoy it. It really does help boost these videos out there in the algorithm. Links, as always, are in the description down below if you want to follow me. I do have a Discord server where you can talk about this with me personally and other members of the Boba Talks community. But that is everything. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you people of Middle Earth in the next video. Goodbye.